The Abarth 500 is a car, we don't really tend to use too much in Test Drive Unlimited. A lot of these little hot hatch style cars, it's something we're not really accustomed to using. We want to use the fancy cars, the good looking cars, the exotic cars, some of these little hot hatches. They don't even get a look in. The Abarth 500 for me has been a car I bought for a purpose. It was of course for the Abarth 500 versus Alpha Mito race over on Hong Kong Island, and I think they've maybe used it for one other weekly event. It's been a car that's largely been under the radar for a very good reason. It's not particularly very good in game. Now imagine driving this thing with the handbrake held on all the time, with the back end stepping out. It's probably about as much fun as we're going to have in the Abarth. It isn't a sexy car, it isn't a fast car, it's not a good handling car, it suffers horrifically with understeer. The handling model of it, I think is the best way to put it, isn't particularly great either. So what can we do with this thing to make it exciting? Do we drive it around in circles like we're doing just now, with the handbrake on constantly, letting the back end of it step out? Or do we change things up completely? Or does the game change things up completely? And they have done so. We're going to have a look at this today. An interesting drop did of course come from Season 2 with the update, and of course moving over to Ibiza we did of course get the introduction of the Celine cars. So we'll head over first of all today to the Celine HQ and take a look at one of these new vehicles, and it is of course another Abarth 500. Now this one's of course got a huge difference. First of all, we can talk about the aesthetics. Candy apple red paint job looks absolutely fantastic. I genuinely love the colour of this car. The white 12 spoke wheels and the white interior. It looks good, but there's a huge difference with this Abarth 500. It is rear wheel drive at just 250,000 credits. It would be criminal if we didn't have a little experiment with this car to see what it's like and to see if it's actually usable in game. So first of all, we will use this car, we'll test it out in its stock format. No tunes, no upgrades, just the raw rear wheel drive Abarth 500. And as we can see when we pull the baby, light it up, the back end of it does truly light up, so it is a full rear wheel drive hot hatch car. Now the instant thing I do think of is the likes of the Clio V6, how terrible the Clio V6 actually was. The understeer that we've already got very early with the Abarth 500 is reminiscent of that Clio V6. It doesn't want to turn round a corner, but we can power slide it, we can drift it, we can throw it around these roundabouts, it will go round in circles all day long. And it actually handles some of these little drifts or, donuts remarkably well, considering the wheelbase of it. But how does it actually handle? We'll throw this around a few corners, a couple of straights, we'll see what kind of performance this thing actually has. In its stock format we can see it's a little bit lively, but with it having a lack of power, it's actually quite controllable. Yeah, it's not going to rip any faces off, it's not going to break any records on track, but in its stock format the car itself's actually alright. Does still unfortunately suffer horrifically with understeer, but that is obviously to be expected. Coming around some of the slower corners, we can get the power down early enough, the back end's not going to kick out from us, we're not going to completely lose control of it. So yeah, in its stock format that would be great, but we already know in game we can't particularly use cars in their stock format, as the AI don't format their cars to match the RP that we go into races with. We have to upgrade our cars to kind of match up with the AI and how it is they're, setting up for the races themselves. Coming to the cockpit cockpit camera of the Abarth, well, do we really get the sensation that this thing's rear wheel drive? For me, I don't really get the perception that it is rear wheel drive until it's too late, until the back end is stepping round from us. But I think that would all change when we do apply a bit more power to this one. So once again we'll head back on over to the Celine HQ and we'll throw some upgrades to this one. We won't do a tune just yet. We'll throw the upgrades at this and we'll see what it's like out the box. So straight back out of HQ, we've literally put everything onto this, all of the sport upgrades and all of the top tier upgrades. Now instantly firing it off the line, it's so much livelier. As soon as we get the power down, we can see that the back end completely snaps on the 500. It constantly wants the back end to overtake the rest of the vehicle. The brakes are very, very sensitive, of course, having race spec brakes essentially on this thing. The brakes are just ferocious on it, and it could be a good thing. We'll have a look at that one shortly. First of all, let's talk about the power delivery though. We can see just how how difficult this thing is truly to handle. As soon as we get any power down, the back end steps out. Testing out some donuts again. We can see it is actually alright at doing donuts, guys. It isn't too bad. We're in 4th gear, round a little mini roundabout here. It's alright, but let's see what the actual handling model of this thing's like. We'll kick it off the roundabout, and we'll go through largely the same kind of path we went before, and we'll see what this thing's like. Let's try and get some power down here. As soon as we put power down with the full upgrades on this thing, the back end just wants to constantly kick out on us and step round. But one thing we can say, with all of those upgrades added, it is a hell of a lot more powerful. It is actually quite a quick little car. It's quite interesting. Coming around the little left-hander here, as soon as we get the power down, the back end again just wants to snap round at us. It is the big problem this car is going to have. It's a short wheelbase, being rear-wheel drive with tons of power. It's not got the best of chassis to be rear-wheel drive with all of that power, as we can see quite clearly. So what I'm going to try and do is put together some form of a tune, a build, to see if this car is even remotely usable, or is it just a dead rubber that we shouldn't be wasting our time with in game. It's an interesting concept. I know a lot of people wanted this to be 4-wheel drive rather than rear-wheel drive, but there's nothing like this car in game, and I think that's got, you know, quite a little bit of an attraction to it. It makes this car kind of cute. That it's small, it's rear-wheel drive, it's very snappy, it's very difficult to drive. It makes the car a little bit different, and I'm not mad about it. I'm not mad at it, rather. I'm also not mad about it, just to be clear. I would have preferred it to be 4-wheel drive, but we've got rear-wheel drive. We've now got a little bit of a tune together with this one, and this is literally the first time I'm going to be testing out this tune. We'll see what it's got for us, guys. As we get the power down, we can see we're getting through the gearbox just a little bit quicker, and it's handling the power delivery a lot better. But this has got one very interesting thing, as we're about to see. It does an endo. The back end lifts up if we apply too much braking, and it's going to cause a bit of an issue. We don't want the back wheels to be lifting off the ground when we're braking, but it's actually quite cool. At the same time, you can see just how much that back end lifts off the ground. It's not ideal, but it's actually kind of cool. Nothing in the game does. Well, why is there a Mustang stopping in the middle of a roundabout? There's nothing else in game that kind of does this for us. There's nothing that is this ridiculous, that's this quirky as the Abarth 500. Terrible understeer that it has. If we push the brakes too hard, the back end's going to lift off the ground time and time again. It's something different. I've spent a lot of time putting a tune together for this one to see if it is remotely usable, and I think I've almost came to a point now where I do think I have got a reasonable build for this one. It's reasonably usable. It's not going to be a world beater. It's not going to beat TTRS's. I don't even think, for the most part, it would beat the stock Abarth 500. That might be a hot take. You guys might be enjoying it. You can let me know in the comments. For me, I think it's a cool little car. It's probably not what I'm going to use all too much, but it's something different in game, and it's something we've all been crying out for. These different types of cars, we've now got them, and there's people bitching and moaning, which, you know, I actually think is quite warranted. There's a merit behind the bitching and the moaning about this specific car. If it were 4-wheel drive, I think this one could actually be like a little world beater. It would be like a little Nissan GT-IR, something to that effect. Short wheelbase, tons of power, 4-wheel drive. It would be ridiculously OP if it were 4-wheel drive. It is rear-wheel drive, however. It's very lively, it's very leery, and it's very difficult to control, but it's also got a lot of beauty about it being that way. So we'll head on over, we'll throw it into a race, shopping in Ibiza town, 2.3 mile clear asphalt race in the daily driver category, lowering the RP down just a little bit between 400 and 500, and it's going to be the big real test if this thing is actually usable whatsoever. We can already see we're surrounded by Audi TTRS's, we've got likes of Mustangs and Mini Cooper John Cooper Works. Trying to launch the 500 off the line, it just wants to light up those rear tyres. We're going to dive it into that very first turn, probably going to get bombarded by AI as we are, clipped from an Alpine on the outside. But we've got around turn 1 all right there. As we start to come around the rest of the track, we know we've got a very tricky right-hander right here. The AI always get caught up with one another. Strange braking zones, compromises us just a little bit, but we've got around it alright so far. As we can now get the power down here, we can see how this actually matches up or stacks up against the rest of the AI cars. Double left-hander here, and again the AI just stopping in the middle of the track, compromising our race. But we are surprisingly, very surprisingly, up into second place as we currently sit. We have got a TTRS up ahead of us. Hopefully that thing doesn't completely stretch away from us. I have got a gut feeling that it's going to. Right-hander here, only just managing to brake in time to stop us hitting the wall through the left-hander. I believe that's a Mustang all over the back end of us at this point. A little bit defensive in our driving as the Mustang tries to come round outside of us, but we managed to close the door there, in through the left-hander, tried to get the power down reasonably early, the back end stepping out on us just a little bit. But we're surviving. I do say that word, I do feel like we are surviving in this race. We've got a nice left-hander up here. How do we do with this one? Nice and tight to the inside. Get the power down nice and early. A little bit of a power slide from the back end of the 500, but again, at this PR level, it's actually getting the power down all right. We're managing to brake just in time, unfortunately clipping a wall there as we try to negotiate getting the power down on the rear-wheel drive 500. That Mustang is still all over the back of us, fortunately clipping that outside wall as we come round the left-hander. Right-hander here. Oh, we get a little bit of a power slide going on. We've managed to navigate it all right. We're not doing too bad. We do still have Caminari all over the back of us in the yellow TTRS, giving us a nudge into this right-hander. We just keep it off that outside wall. We're holding on, guys. We are holding on. We're hopefully going to get a podium. About 20% left of this race. Round the right-hander, again getting the power down. We can see the back end of the 500 wanting to snap on us just there. And do we commit? We don't commit. We do lift as we come around that left-hander. We just don't have it. And the TTRS in first place has given us a gift. It has done the typical thing. It's taken the outside wall. It's given us a gift. We've actually took a win in the rear-wheel drive Fiat 500. I am absolutely stunned by this one. Never thought we were going to win it, never thought we were going to get the podium. I didn't think we were going to be anywhere close. Yes, it was up against AI, but we can see how much we did indeed struggle using the Abarth 500 in that one. We did manage to take out a first place on shopping in Ibiza town. Genuinely stunned by that one. I didn't expect it to happen. Managing to do a lot of progression there. Another 30,000 in the bag. Now we know we're not breaking any times with this one. Very suspicious time up there in first place from V8 in a Celine 500. 1 minute 31. We managed to do a 2 minute and 5. I'm not going to say I should have done a faster time or that nobody should beat my time, but the fact that somebody in an Abarth, a Celine 500 managed to do a time quite that good, very, very, very suspicious indeed. Now for sanity, what I did want to do is come over into the Audi TTRS and have a look at that time that the individual done in the Abarth 500 rear wheel drive. A 1 minute 31. Now considering that the TTRS is the OP daily driver car, I wanted to kind of put a lap together here to see, you know, just how unrealistic that first time was. Now I'm not going to sit here and call that person a cheat or they must have been using, you know, game assists to get that kind of time, but it's almost impossible, dare I say completely impossible, to do a 1 minute 31 in an Abarth 500, which is ridiculously hard to drive. I'm going to set a time here with the Audi TTRS. It's not going to be the quickest, cleanest or fastest lap, but it will give us a good comparison for that time we just set in the Abarth 500 to the time we've set in this TTRS to the time that V8 set in his Abarth 500. Now if they are on YouTube and they did do that time genuinely and there is a video there, I would love to fucking see it, but I don't believe that is going to be the case. I do believe that is a fake time. Considering when we look through the rest of Leaderboard, there is no other Celine 500s in sight. It's very suspicious indeed. Now we can already see just how much quicker the TTRS is coming around this track specifically. We can carry a lot more speed into corners, we can get the power down a lot quicker, and obviously our braking zones are far better in a fantastically balanced Quattro TTRS. Coming around these right-handers in particular here, the Abarth 500 was almost coming to a stop trying to get round that one as soon as we got the power down. The back end was sliding round on us. So I have a little bit of an issue with that. We can see these times on the leaderboard and they're still there on the game, as in the devs and Steam, for instance, isn't doing something about it, that they're not penalising these guys for putting those kind of times up. It is creating a big issue. But as we do come off to cross the line here in the TTRS, not the fastest time on the leaderboard, but it gives us something in comparison to the rest of the times that are there. In specific to that one in first place, we managed to do a 2 minute and 4 2.5. So yeah, there is a big issue there. A lot of people still cheating in the game, and it is very unfortunate. Back to the Abarth 500 rear-wheel drive itself, the Celine edition. It's a fun little car. It's not going to cost you a lot of money, guys, to jump into it, have a little play about, hell, build your own kind of tune to see what kind of performance you can get out of this thing. Perhaps you can get it balanced a lot better than I can. For me, I think it's a nice addition to the game. It's something quirky, and, you know, are we going to get more like this? Is there going to be more of these quirky conversions, front-wheel drive to rear-wheel drive, perhaps rear to front or front to four-wheel drive? The options are endless there. Hopefully we see more of this from, you know, from the KT and from Nacon, the devs of the game. Now, just to kind of talk about the tune itself, I've put the tune together on screen for you guys to have a look at. Gearbox ratios, put them all down to the left hand side to try and get the traction down as best as we can, to try and get through the gears as quickly as we can. And I think the gearbox build we've kind of done there is overall pretty good. Having a look at downforce, 1 and 1. Try to plant this thing onto the ground, and again I could argue that we've actually done an alright build there with how the speed is put down here. Over to suspension, dropped the rear end, lifted the front end to try and get some of the power planted to the rear of the car. We can see the back springs are obviously as stiff as they can be, front springs almost as stiff as they can be, again to try and load up the rear of the vehicle. We can see that through the compression and the rebound as well, trying to load up the rear of the 500 as much as we can and leaving the front end nice and loose. Over to the handling, not touching the diffs all too much, maybe adjusting the rear acceleration just a little bit to 29%, but there's not really a lot, in my opinion, we can do with that one. Again, with the anti-roll bars, trying to leave them as loose as I can. Camber, interestingly, I've put positive camber onto the rear wheels, negative camber onto the front, again, just to try and balance this thing as it goes around some corners. And then the tyre pressures, dropping them down to 2.9 at the rear and 2.7 bar at the front. Again, just trying to load this thing up as best as I can to handle out some of the, you know, the tighter corners and getting the power down ultimately in this rear-wheel drive car. Over to the brakes, the standard kind of build there, 80% to the rear and 310 brake pressure. I found was the best balance here to try to stop this thing lifting up at the back end when applying some heavy brakes. But with 544 brake horsepower, 1,000 kilos in weight, power to weight ratio, this thing's absolutely fantastic. A top speed of 249 miles an hour and 0 to 60 in 4.4 seconds for a rear wheel drive short wheelbase car. I think it's actually pretty damn good. Now we can talk about some of the exclusive events we've got for this. What was this? Finish 50 races in the top one, or in first place with that car. 100 clan races, yeah, complete 100 clan races with the winning clan, and 750,000 credits in a certain district. Which district was that one? I'm not entirely sure. I believe it's actually top right district of this map. But yeah, basically 750,000 winnings for winning races in the top right district. Oh, that's where things will be interesting. Taking this one off-road. That might be another video. Can we use this car off-road? We need to make 750,000 credits in this region itself. That's going to get interesting. The last event there, of course, the expert. We've got beat 100 clan members in races. Again, it's going to come quite natural there for 100,000 of rewards. 500,000, 250,000 and 250,000. There's actually quite a lot of money to be made there. Recoup all of the investment into this car. You'd actually make more money by completing out those events. So there's plenty there to do with the Celine 500. Is it a car I'm going to use a lot of? Absolutely not. Is it a world beater? Definitely not. But it's fun. It's something different, guys. It's a rear-wheel drive, short wheelbase car that's ridiculous to handle. It's a ridiculous build. And I love it. I genuinely love it. It's not a car I'm going to use in the game all too much. It was a small investment to have some fun with. I'll probably return to it just to be playing about with it. But overall, yeah, it was a nice experiment for today, guys. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Stay tuned for more updates on Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown.